I think Trump wants to pump Bitcoin. I think any politician that figures this out is going to want to pump Bitcoin, right? Because you have to pump your balance sheet, and Bitcoin's the one thing that if you understand it, there's no human cost to it, right? But if you just keep pumping the price of Bitcoin, I mean, the only negative result to that is that you'll get some people that complain that they weren't early enough.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Joining me this week is Luke Broyles. He is an advisor with the Bitcoin Advisor, and he's also here to promote the Camp Nakamoto experience, which is coming up this October. I can't wait to learn more about it. Luke, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for the invitation.
Let's start with your Bitcoin backstory, your coin story. You're 26 years old, so you're one of the Gen Zers embracing Bitcoin. Tell me a little bit about how you got into this. Where are you from, and how'd you get interested in Bitcoin?
So I live in Michigan right now, previously from Indiana. That's where I was born and raised about a decade ago. But now I live in Michigan, and I was into filmmaking and video production, that kind of thing. And I was going to college for that, filmmaking. And I also had an interest in history. I've always loved history. I've always loved American history, world history. And in college, and really the years leading up to it as well, but especially once in college, I had also had this passion or this interest in like what's going on, like, wanting to understand the world, right? I had made documentaries in my filmmaking endeavors, and that was really enjoyable, and I always loved learning. And so just something didn't seem right. And I thought, eventually someday it's going to be really difficult to make a movie, like even back then, right? And this is like, 6, 7, 8 years ago for me, I suppose. But I remember thinking like, I don't really want to go live in like LA or Atlanta or, nothing wrong with New York City, but, I don't really want to go to one of those 3 big cities where all these video productions are and produce somebody else's movie. Now I'm a Bitcoiner. I would say a lot of them are fiat movies, right? Mm-hmm. So not really my kind of thing anyway. So, just trying to make a buck or a cash grab. And so I thought about it and I was like, well, I don't really want to chase that wheel. I feel like it's going to get farther away from me. Like I don't want to live somewhere super expensive, somewhere I don't really want to live. I like being outdoors. I like going on walks. I like being in nature and that kind of thing. And so I got into learning more and more about investing and everything. And then it really quickly clicked with all my history background because I learned a lot of history over the years. And, of course, the money situation, the monetary situation, history is not really talked about. And so once I realized, the money breaks once in a while. And, in some cases, not once in a while, but very often. And so it was like a whole nother angle of something you've already seen. And so I think a lot of people, when they've studied something a lot and then they see an entirely new angle of it, it like rekindles a lot of excitement and interest. And so I was having a lot of interest in trying to figure this out. Like, what do I do? Should I, what do I do about this? Like, this seems a big problem. And, so 2017, 18, 19, and I was already learning about it in those years, trying to figure it out. But then really 2020 happened. And I think that's the case for when a lot of people got into Bitcoin was 2020 and seeing the absurdity of it all. And I think for a lot of other people already in Bitcoin, it heightened their conviction. And I'm more like that, right? And I remember it was an Alex Gladstein video, and there were a couple other ones too, but in particular one from him where it clicked. I remember the very moment, sometimes I don't remember a lot of the moments of, looking back. I mean, it's I guess because it's been enough years and I didn't realize the significance it would have in in my life at the time. I don't remember a lot, but I do remember this moment. And I realized, oh, wow, this is like not only about me and preserving my purchasing power. Like this is, I still believe this even more so today, is that this is going to have a really big impact on the future world, future generations, helping improve efficiency, helping, as Michael Saylor would say, engineer a better world. And so really when I saw Bitcoin less of a investment to make, but kind of like as a monetary nation to join, that's when it hit. It wasn't quite overnight, but it was very rapidly where I'm like, I gotta work for this thing as if it's, not even like a job or even like for an income question, but it's like basically fighting a war almost to a certain extent.
Coin Stories is proudly brought to you by Gemini. Investing in Bitcoin has never been easier with Gemini's Bitcoin credit card. Earn up to 4% back in Bitcoin on everyday purchases like gas, dining, groceries, and more, with no annual fee, no foreign transaction fees, and no exchange fees on your rewards. And this summer, get 10% back in Bitcoin at golf courses. Plus, sign up today and get a $200 Bitcoin bonus when you spend $3,000 in your first 90 days. Apply now at Gemini.com/Natalie. If you're like me and want to stay on top of Bitcoin without getting lost in all the noise, you've got to check out the weekly CIO memo from Bitwise Asset Management. Bitwise has been around since 2017 and manages more than $10 billion across 30 plus strategies. CIO Matt Hogan puts together a quick 5-minute memo that breaks down the biggest stories in digital assets each week. Just go to bitwiseinvestments.com/CIO memo and check it out. And always, of course, carefully consider the extreme risks associated with crypto. Coin Stories is also brought to you by Ledn. Need cash but don't want to sell your Bitcoin? Ledn is the global leader in Bitcoin-backed loans, issuing over $9 billion in loans since 2018. And they were the first to offer proof of reserves. With Ledn, you get custody loans, no monthly payments, and more. Visit ledn.io/Natalie. Do you remember that exact moment? Like, what did Alex say, or did you read something? Was it a particular interview? What was it?
Well, it wasn't any one specific thing he said, but I think it was just the context of, oh, wow, like I had been looking at Bitcoin through the lens of never go up, never go down, for years at that point, right? I first heard of it maybe 2016, 2017. And so, but when I started thinking like, oh, what is the human cost of these numbers on the screen? So I think it was more just that framing and that concept and like reorienting this Bitcoin thing in that lens of like, yeah, sure, it's number go up, price go up and all that, but none of that happens if you don't have people that are living, right? You don't have the world flourishing, right? So I think recontextualizing that and reframing that helped me realize like, oh wow, this could have a tremendous impact on really one of two ways: either preventing something horrible that could happen in the future, or hopefully incentivizing more good things to happen, right? I've had family members that have had various kinds of illnesses in the past. I know a lot of people that it's like there are treatments to diseases today or cancers or whatever it is today that weren't around 30 years ago, right? And in some of the documentaries I've done and just my pursuit of trying to understand the world best I can, there's a lot of other people that fall through the cracks because they're in some, developing country that doesn't have the financial privilege that we have here in America, and even specifically here in New York City, the financial capital of the world,
Yeah, Alex's book, Check Your Financial Privilege, left a huge impression on me. And his way of explaining financial impression and everything that's gone on with the World Bank and IMF is second to none. I mean, I think his work is absolutely fantastic. Your filmmaker background's interesting. I didn't know that about you. What's funny is I can kind of relate in the sense that when I was young, I was always captivated with media and storytelling, and I always wanted to work in that visual medium, but I actually didn't know if I wanted to work in news or in film, because my true love was probably film when I was younger, and I would act in plays and I took acting classes. Really? But, it's funny. I mean, growing up with my parents who were very, very strict and amazing. I mean, I'm grateful for it now, but I couldn't imagine going off and having, paying for college to basically learn to act and working as like a waitress, and the grind to become an actor in Los Angeles it's very difficult. And I thought that it would bring a lot of suffering to my parents who wanted me to be a doctor or whatever. So I felt like a nice medium was actually journalism, because you get the performance element, but then you also get to tell stories, and they just happen to be real stories. So it's funny because it led me down that path, but I love movies. So what are your favorite movies, and do you still want to create like maybe a feature-length Bitcoin movie, whether it's fiction or nonfiction?
Yeah, well, I currently am making a Bitcoin documentary, so I am still doing that.
Okay.
And the irony in all this is that, the movie aside, like just the irony is I make way more content now than I ever did when I was making movies, and it's kind of amazing to me, right? And it's meet people where they are. People want to hear about Bitcoin. They want to hear about number go up. They want to hear about how to stack more Bitcoin, end up with more Bitcoin. So, meet people where they are, serve that problem. And ironically, I make way more content, whether it's YouTube vlog videos or it's Bitcoin podcasts just like this, or it's the movie I'm working on, and whatever it is. I make way more now than I ever thought I would, which is kind of the ironic thing.
What's the documentary about?
Bitcoin.
But like specifically? Who are you interviewing? What's sort of
a bunch of people are in it. Myself, Jeff Booth, obviously narrating it, Jeff Booth, Peter Downworth, David St-Onge, Seb Bunny, Dasby, a lot of wonderful people are in it. And it's been a long endeavor. Movies always are long endeavor. But at the end of the day, like, the goal is just reach people, help people hear about Bitcoin, whether that's with, all kinds of media, right? And I think it's funny when I see people online criticize people that make Bitcoin content, whether it's myself or you or anybody else. And at times it can feel like it's oversaturated, and I think that's kind of the running joke, is that another Bitcoin podcast or whatever, right? Or another person talking about Bitcoin, right? Like, we really need that. But I think the thing that keeps me up at night and the thing that worries me is that, there has been a great amount of growth in the last couple of years, but I think that the needs of the future are accelerating more than our ability to fill them, which I guess is a larger concept that I subscribe to, is that we have less in common with the future than the past, right? So it's like, sure, maybe we are doubling the number of Bitcoin educators, to use your word. Maybe we're doubling that every Bitcoin cycle or every couple of years or whatever. But we're going from 100 to 500 to 1,000 Bitcoin voices out there. But the reality is that almost all those voices are still in English, right? What about the other, majority of the world, by the way, that doesn't speak English, right? People say, oh, you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. And, they're not entirely wrong. But to be born in a Western country, or to be born in a, country with financial privilege, and to be speaking by chance the right language, where like just a couple years makes all the difference.
Sure.
There's a lot of Bitcoin content in Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin, et cetera. I'm sure, obviously I don't listen to it. I don't watch it. I don't know what the content, I don't know what the quality of it, but a couple years makes all the difference. Right. Yeah. And so anyway, all that to say is that that's the larger focus and passion, and why I pivoted so firmly into Bitcoin as quickly as I did when that thought, caught hold of me. That's another moment I remember. I remember that one moment where I realized, oh, Bitcoin has a human cost, and I need to take this seriously. And then another moment I remember very clearly was when I had that epiphany that, oh wow, we have less in common with the future in the past, and like these needs are going to be greater and greater and greater, and we have to build now, right? Like over the next few decades, there are going to be billions of kids born in Asia, Africa, other parts of the world. Obviously, places like America, Japan, Europe, we're more or less stagnating, fertility-wise, which is its own set of problems, right? And crisis. And we need to start building and accelerating so that hopefully we can reverse that by the time it gets here. That's very hard to reverse. But on the flip side of the coin, so to speak, there's a lot of places around the world that the needs of the future generations are accelerating faster than the rate at which we're helping people, or that they're helping themselves or building up, upgrade their societies. And a lot of that is because we're siphoning wealth away from them, and we're bringing it back to here. We're bringing it back to the West. I can go on with examples, but I think many people know those. Two places I've been to have done documentaries before. One was in Mali, Africa, and that was in the early mid 2010s, and Guatemala. And I think, those are two great examples. I can only speak to those because I've been there briefly, only for a couple weeks at a time. But I think those are great examples, right? In Mali, it's still the French franc, right? Currency, the French are, harvesting wealth from this impoverished nation, one of the poorest in the world, bringing it back to themselves. And, that's not me hating on the French. The reality is that if they stepped away and took the franc away and said, oh, we don't think this is right. I mean, the reality is that Al-Qaeda or some other, terrorist organization would just take in charge anyway. So that's the thing that hit me so hard, is that, oh, wow, there's like not a solution to this, right? You could say, oh, the French are horrible because they've got, 24 countries that are still on their currency. All of them are, more impoverished compared to them, right? Or people can hate on the Republicans or the Democrats, the Americans or the Chinese, right? You can yell and shake your fist politically all you want at these countries, but the reality is that for the people there in the moment, people living there, the problem's not solved, and us just yelling about it doesn't solve that problem. And it's a very real crisis, right? Like in Mali, you have all kinds of environmental problems because their needs are rising faster. It is a short-term mindset, right? Not because there are any they're the exact same as us, right? Just the difference is that they're starting from much less because so much has been siphoned away. Or like in Guatemala is another example, there's all kinds of problems where, the kids have, malnutrition, they don't get proper education. A lot of the families cook an open flame within their homes. So it means that they're breathing in all the smoke, which means more health problems, a couple decades down the road. And, of course, that means that the parents are spending more money on, spending time just tending to a fire, doing things that otherwise could be used to build a family. And meanwhile, they're cutting down all these trees to burn it. And so, of course, then there's all these species problems, forest problems. And then us, Westerners, our infinite fiat wisdom, we come down and we say, oh, you can't do this. You can't cut down these trees because this, frog or whatever is going to die. And, we're not wrong, right? But the reality is that my point here is that the solution is not zero-sum mindset thinking. The solution is non-zero-sum mindset thinking. And the importance of Bitcoin is that it gives the economic incentive for the whole world and for every individual to not have that zero-sum mindset thinking, because it is that, and that's why I like the word political currency so much, because that's what it is, right? We call it dollars, but it is that zero-sum framing that makes me really sick, right? Because on one side of the scale is the number of one and zeros. On the other side of the scale is some person that most of us don't think about, right? We always want to talk about, are the lockdowns going to shut down the economy, or what's going to happen to S&P? But it's like, how many people are going to lose their jobs here, in the U.S. or abroad? How many are going to fall into hunger, right?
Right.
World Health Organization said 100 million people fell into hunger because of our lockdowns, right? So anyway, rant aside, yes, that's a thing that caught a hold of me, and that's why I love doing what I do, because so many people in the space, including yourself and including, probably many of the people listening, are not zero-sum minded people. And I think the world needs a lot more of that.
This episode is brought to you by Casa, the leader in Bitcoin self-custody solutions, helping people like me secure their wealth with simple, powerful multi-key vaults. And now Casa is here to help businesses and even governments do the same. Introducing Casa Business, a secure, easy-to-use 3-key vault designed for small and large businesses with team signing capabilities and a web dashboard. Start your Bitcoin treasury the secure way and protect your assets. Get 10% off your Casa plan at casa.io/Natalie. Next up, Bitkey, a Bitcoin hardware wallet with multi-sig security, inheritance, and a recovery system designed for real life. No complex setup, no seed phrase, just true self-custody without the stress. Named one of Time's best inventions in 2024. Use code STORIES for 20% off at bitkey.world. Up next, the Bitcoin way. There's only one way to protect your Bitcoin from government, politicians, and third-party risk, and that is 100% self-custody. My friends at the Bitcoin way will train you how to do this the right way the first time. No compromises. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Natalie to speak with the experts about making sure your Bitcoin is secure and private. Want to win 1 million sats just by answering Bitcoin trivia? The top 50 players win free sats weekly. One lucky winner gets 1 million sats each month. With Speed Wallet, you can send Bitcoin, swap to stable coins, shop gift cards, play games, explore mini apps. So don't miss Speed Trivia. Head to speed.app/coinstories and use code CoinStories10 for 5,000 free sats. Well, you bring up really excellent points. There's so much need around the world, and sometimes we don't really put a human face to it. Even though we're watching so much more content, it's different when you interact with it in person and see how this broken monetary system has literally devastated people's lives around the world to the benefit of certain groups, certain organizations, certain countries. And I think that we need to shine a spotlight more on all of that, because I think that we kind of almost protect ourselves within our institutions, right? And within these kind of groups that we've created. But those walls are starting to break down because the system is unsustainable the way that it is. And so many people have been left behind. And of course, they're going to start to rally together and say, this isn't fair. I don't want my life to look like this. And I'm actually grateful that they have a tool like Bitcoin, which is a peaceful tool for a revolution. And I do hope that it empowers a lot of people. But to your earlier points about how we have more and more podcasters and educators, I mean, why do you think the message is still sort of slow to get across to the mainstream and the majority? Because I just had Peter McCormick on the show recently, and we were talking about how it just feels different this bull market. It doesn't have the same pandemonium as 2021 when the money printer was going burr from the pandemic. And Peter, to my sadness, said that he doesn't think the crazy bull markets are going to come back anymore, that it's sort of over. Bitcoin's turned more passive. Do you agree? Or like, why don't you think mainstream is getting as excited as we are about Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm the first to admit I was very wrong. I thought the entire last bear market, I'm like, as soon as we hit 70K, that's gonna be where fireworks starts, right? Because we hit 69K, 69,420, right? It was the big meme last cycle, right? That's what we hit or whatever, more or less. And I'm like, okay, 70K. When there's a 7 in front of all those zeros, those 4 zeros, that's when the media is gonna freak out and everybody's gonna freak out. And now here we are, like basically double that.
Yeah.
And it is genuinely shocking to me. I'm like, where are the people?
No, I'm serious. Last night I was here at dinner. I tweeted about this.
I saw your tweet.
I swear, it's like hundreds of thousands of impressions because, when you're alone, you just start talking to the people around you. And this group, they're working finance, and of course, I asked them, "Are you investing in Bitcoin?" And it was all of the crazy FUD that I thought we had maybe broken through, especially now that major advisors are recommending allocations of like 40% to Bitcoin. Ray Dalio is recommending 15%. Larry Fink says Bitcoin's going to go to 700,000. We might have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And these guys were talking about like, it's a Ponzi scheme. It uses too much energy. It doesn't have cash flows. You can't do anything with Bitcoin.
That's right.
I mean, why aren't we reaching the masses?
No. Well, I think there's a few reasons. I think one reason is, I guess maybe I'll say the moral reason, I'll say the practical reason. So I think the moral reason is, frankly, a lot of people don't want to look at what's actually going on. Because it is painful, right? Kind of like we were saying, or kind of like I was saying a moment ago. There's a huge cost to our political money, and we don't really want to admit it. Number one, we don't admit it because we don't really think there's an alternate, right? Kind of like I was saying before, it's like, oh well, if the French aren't in charge of 20 different, literally 20 different African countries use, the French currency, right? So it's like, well, if the French don't use it, some local dictator's going to use it, that aren't wrong. So I think when there is one evil that is seen as a lesser of other evils, people just kind of accept it and they forget it happens. But that's what concerns me, because those are the exact kinds of things that we tend to forget, right? Every year, 8 or 9 million starve every year, right? 3 to 3.5 million freeze every winter, right? I mean, if you just look at the human cost of, hey, us monetizing oil and forcing energy prices up, like that, not 100% of that is practical, right? Some percentage between 0 and 100 is because of our fiat inefficiency, right? Like what percentage of everyone that starves every year is from our fiat inefficiency, right? We make enough food for 10.5 billion people. There's, still a billion people that are malnourished, and, 9 million of those billions. So my point is that I don't really think we want to look at that because it scares us and it frustrates us, right? We don't really want to think about, oh, well, what happened in Germany? What happened to the Weimar Republic? That couldn't happen here in America, right? People don't really want to admit that, oh, by me participating in holding money in my bank account or buying American debt, I'm to some degree contributing to that. So I think that's the moral reason, but I think the much more common reason is that people just don't think about it. I just don't think people are that curious enough. I think Bitcoin's number one problem is that not enough people believe it can improve or better their personal life. I don't think anyone, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people will make that switch until they see that. And so as much as I have a love-hate relationship with the number go up prices of Bitcoin, the reality is that is what Bitcoin's greatest need is, right? You've had Michael Saylor many times on the show, and something he says almost every time is this idea of digital Manhattan, which, since we're in Manhattan, I think it's pretty appropriate. And the metaphor I always use with people new trying to understand this is that you can't build you can't build a city to accommodate 8 million people until the dirt itself, or the base layer itself, is valuable enough to justify the investment in steel and infrastructure, right? So it's a kind of rambling answer, but long story short, why don't more people have an interest in Bitcoin, even though it's every single time in Bitcoin's history somebody has said it is dead, is not been dead? Oh, it'll never hit 10,000. Oh, it'll never hit 70,000. It'll never go back above 70,000. It'll never hit 100,000. It'll never hit 500,000, a million, 5 million, whatever it be, right? And I think it's going to be that way for a very long time. There's a quadrillion in assets today. That's going to be 10 quadrillion in a couple decades, and 5% of that money makes its way into Bitcoin with some minimal multiplier. Like I literally think it's going to take longer than people think, and I think that is a uncomfortable thing for a lot of Bitcoiners. They think they want to see Bitcoin Omega tomorrow, and maybe that'll happen. But at the end of the day, I think Bitcoin will be 5 million, 10 million or more, and people will still be saying, yeah, well, it's 8% of world assets now. It can't go any higher, right? Like, that's huge. Like, that's crazy. That's not sustainable. I literally think it's going to be an exceedingly long period of time. And I think that's logical, because if everybody all of a sudden got it for some reason, then it would just become everything instantly. And I think it's going to take a long time.
I want to pull on that thread a little bit, because now we have so much more institutional adoption. We're getting regulatory clarity. We have the president on board for Bitcoin, at least this president. So how do you see it really playing out over the next maybe 5 and then 10 years and beyond? And you don't have to talk about just price action. I'm talking about like adoption, integration with the traditional financial system. Do you think that more people will start to allocate in a passive way because of these ETFs and all of the strategies that exist from TradFi? How do you see this playing out?
It's a good question. I think debt is the answer, which is kind of ironic because fiat money is a debt-based system, but I think that's exactly the point. Fiat is a debt-based system. And the main problem for these politicians, whether it's the America's president or any other country's leaders, the main problem they have is that they need to keep forcing prices up. Housing needs to get more expensive. Oil needs to get more expensive. Stock valuations need to get more expensive, right? It's not enough to have your stock market be valued at a third of a century. It needs to go out to a full century, right? And of course, this is a real problem, for their voter base, right? Because if energy gets more expensive, people can't heat their homes in the winter, right? If housing gets more expensive, people can't buy as big of a house, all these kinds of problems. And so between this rock and the hard place of they need to make more debt to fund the Ponzi scheme, right? But they're reaching a limit where the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. Sure, you could do another couple $1 trillion and more trillions of dollars, but like you can only double the price of a house in terms of wages so many times until nobody left can afford them, and you get kicked out of your political chair with a bunch of proverbial pitchforks, right? So I think the answer is debt, because fiat is a debt-based system, and I know that is the largest pool of capital in the world, right? We can talk about how, and everyone does talk about it, right? There's the famous Jesse Myers chart. That's a wonderful chart, where art is whatever, 12, 13 trillion, gold's 20 trillion, American or global stocks, 150, whatever trillion, real estate, 300 trillion, bonds, 350 trillion, whatever it is. But the thing that everybody forgets, because we're all living in the moment and because we can't predict it, which is inherent a part to the design of fiat, the largest pool of dollars is in the future, right? It's like, that's where the money is, right? Like like I said earlier, 10 quadrillion dollars of assets, whatever, 10, 20, pick your number years from now. Like 90% of the dollars between now and then are in the next couple of decades, right? Less in common with the future in the past. There are more dollars in front of us than behind us perpetually, right? There's more technological acceleration and deflation, therefore needing to keep up the printing for a variety of reasons, right? And so I think, to answer your question, I think the way Bitcoin has this hostile takeover of the world's assets is just take dollars from the future, bring them to today, right? Like you, me, everybody watching this, the best possible dream investment you could have is taking a time machine, right? Paying 5% interest or whatever, taking a time machine, going back in time 10 years ago, taking future dollars that are worth less in real terms and in terms of Bitcoin, going back in time and buying it, right? Obviously, we can't do that. And so the second best thing we can do is, instead of time traveling from the present to the past, time travel from the future to the present, right? So all I have to say is that I think that's what happens. To give a bit more of a, I guess, concrete example instead of pie in the sky analogies, is I think the Bitcoin mortgage is going to be a really big concept. I
Mm.
think the Bitcoin HELOCs could be a great concept. I think the merging of Bitcoin and real estate loans, I think that's a huge concept. Bitcoin treasury loans, all those things I think are huge concepts. As an example, like the average person with real estate equity, 300 trillion of American real estate or whatever, roughly half of that or something is paid off equity. Like, is it going to be harder to convince somebody who's more skeptical of Bitcoin, hey, you should buy $1,000 of Bitcoin a month for the next 200 months? Or is it going to be, hey, you can refinance your home and you can convert this equity into Bitcoin, right? Like that's literally what's going to be possible by the end of this year, right? This is something that we're working on in various kinds of partnerships with multiple different companies. And I think that's going to blow people's minds, is that Bitcoiners will be able to buy houses with 0% down, quote unquote. They won't have to sell any Bitcoin to convert it into fiat. Or if they have, let's say, $1 million house, let's say they got $500,000 of equity, $500,000 of debt, they'll be able to refinance at 100% LTV, convert the equity into Bitcoin. And all of a sudden you present that to real estate investors and you say, hey, Mr. Real Estate Investor, you got this investment portfolio, you want some Bitcoin. Sure, you could sell it, wait 6 months. Hopefully Bitcoin doesn't double in the next 6 months. You could pay all these realtor fees. You can do all this stuff. Or you can just do this loan, 100% LTV against your real estate, 50% when it's 1-to-1 with the Bitcoin. And anyway, all to say is that I think that's where the money comes from. And I think Michael Saylor is proving that. That's where, obviously his company's not over levered, but basically what he's doing is he's taking money from the future and, penetrating the S&P 500, Trojan horsing the stock market. And, I think the housing market is a way bigger idea than that. And I think the Bitcoin treasury companies are a way bigger idea than that. So whether it's with Bitcoin mortgages and home products, or it's with the treasury companies, or whatever the model is, I think the way Bitcoin takes over the world is less so of traditional fiat rails selling those assets to buy Bitcoin, because that is a systemic risk to the political system. I think it's more so just keep refinancing, stimulate those dollars and force up the price of Bitcoin, and I think that's, it's a bit of a hopium thing, but I think it's also true, right? It's like, I think Trump wants to pump Bitcoin. I think any politician that figures this out is going to want to pump Bitcoin, right? Because, you have to pump your balance sheet, and Bitcoin's the one thing that if you understand it, there's no human cost to it, right? Every percentage point you force the price of real estate up, you get, there is some amount of negative sentiment in your polling results, right? But if you just keep pumping the price of Bitcoin, I mean, the only negative result to that is that you'll get some people that complain that they weren't too early, or they weren't early enough, or they don't feel that way. So anyway, I think it's gonna be really interesting. But yes, I think debt and those kinds of products are going to blow people's minds, because the products we're working on now are 3 to 5% interest. I think within a couple of years it'll be a lower interest rate doing a Bitcoin loan than any other kind of fiat loan. I think that's going to blow people's minds.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be pristine collateral. And to some of the points that you made, I think what Michael and Strategy are doing with the Bitcoin-backed credit products is just brilliant. I think they're revolutionizing the fixed income market. And it's just going to be so interesting to see what comes out of all of this kind of lending and borrowing against your Bitcoin, because you're right. I mean, more and more people, if the interest rates come down, are going to want to use this. I certainly wish that I had taken out loans when interest rates were super low and just bought Bitcoin. That would have been great if I had done that. But yeah, and to your other point, Bitcoin is a perfect shock absorber, inflation shock absorber for our government, which needs to inflate away the debt, which needs to devalue the dollar, which needs lower interest rates to refinance debt. So yeah, I think Bitcoin is going to go higher, and that's exactly what our leaders want. Well, before we wrap up, I really want to touch on Camp Nakamoto. Can you tell us about it? What's the vision behind it, and what's the experience going to be like?
Yeah, so the concept is very similar. We've lost the future in the past, and the good thing with that is that the majority of Bitcoiners are in front of us, not behind us or in the present moment. The trade-off of that is that not necessarily the average, let's say the median Bitcoiner 10 years from now is going to have the same kinds of convictions, personal experience, and everything else that Bitcoiners have today, right? So Camp Nakamoto is basically an in-person retreat, right? It's not really a conference, it's more like a retreat. It's a private island in Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. It's going to be in peak fall colors in October. It's going to be absolutely wonderful. I think 150 people is the max we're allowed to bring there. I think there's like maybe 30, 40 tickets left or whatever. But the point is that me and the other two guys teaming up together to put on the event, we were having this conversation 18 months ago or so when we first had the idea for it. And basically we're like, we just want to hang out with all these people in Bitcoin. And, like there's nothing wrong with the conferences, but it's like, we're kind of tired of the whole thousands of people thing and like spectacle or whatever. Right. And like, they're very expensive. Right. And so, do we think we could like do something cool together and like bring a bunch of people and like, have a really good time? And anyway, we've tried it out and people have had a lot of interest in it. And I love it. A lot of people are going, you're showing up virtually, I think, along with a lot of other folks, Greg Voss, Lavish. But of course,
Greg's going to be a part of it officially?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm so happy.
Yeah, he's a part of it.
Miss him.
Yeah. I miss him too. He was the first, that's the whole story. He was the first Bitcoiner I met in real life when I got interrogated at the Canadian border. But that's literally Greg Voss had to bring me out of, anyway, so that was my introduction to Bitcoin and Greg. But anyway.
I love it.
But yeah, the camp is, the goal is make friends, right?
Yeah.
And so, a lot of my clients are going, a lot of my friends are going. I invite anybody watching this to consider joining. It's 3 days, beautiful outdoor, place, family fun activities. A lot of people are bringing their spouse or their kids or their friends or their neighbor or their business partner, whomever. Hopefully it's a good orange pilling opportunity. And these are really, I think these are really high quality people, not only because they're super genuine and nice and fun to hang out with, but they're also very knowledgeable, right? Larry Lepard, Mark Moss, Anders, we got Dave Foley, multiple other hedge fund guys, people on camera, right? Like you and me or whomever, but a lot of people that aren't on camera that are equally as kind and equally as intelligent. So, so I encourage people to check it out. But really my big encouragement beyond that and, trying to get people to join, I guess, really my big encouragement is like make friends and savor these moments because, there are going to be great days ahead of us, but these also are the good olden days. So enjoy it when you have it.
Yeah, real life connections with Bitcoiners are just so priceless. I'm glad you said that families are welcome. It's a really family friendly event. I want to put a pin there because I think that the more that we bring in just the children and wives and girlfriends, all of it, like the more the merrier, right? And I also heard that you're very health conscious with the food, that the food is very much it's not fiat, it's very Bitcoin friendly health food, right?
Yes, Texas Slim and Anders and a bunch of other people, they're in charge of all that. So I don't know what they have planned, but I'm sure it's gonna be a lot of great people friendly food, not any kind of soy fiat centralized sludge.
Perfect. Well, we have the link to tickets in the show notes, so please check those out. Luke, any final thoughts?
No, I would just encourage everybody to stay focused and focus on their biggest cost of all, which is opportunity cost. A lot of people ask me all the time, should I do this? Should I do that? What's the cheapest hardware wallet? What's the cheapest this? What's the cheapest that? What's the cheapest treasury company? Blah, 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 blah. It's like your biggest cost always is opportunity cost. So always be focusing on increasing your Bitcoin stack. Always be focusing not on the zero sum mindset of, cost A versus cost B. Focus on the non-zero sum mindset of how to grow and how to expand. And I think that's not only be better for your Bitcoin portfolio, I think it's gonna be better for your life, So don't go cheap. Don't skimp out on the things that are really important.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining me on the show. Congratulations on the event and everything you're doing in the space. And I can't wait to watch your movie when it finally comes out. So keep us posted on that. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Coin Stories. Make sure you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss any new episodes. And if you can, turn on those notifications and leave us a positive review. They really help the show grow organically with new listeners. We have a free weekly newsletter. You can sign up at thenewsblock.substack.com. This show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing should constitute as official investment advice, and you should always do your own research. I'm always open to feedback and guest suggestions, so please feel free to reach out at info@talkingbitcoin.com. I'll see you next time.